would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundungurra land, and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I have just finished devouring your book this week.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and it is honestly just wonderful. It really is.
Thank you so much.
It is just a really and I think you sort of mentioned this when I first reached out about you joining on the podcast, which is, there is a lot of pain and a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt for a lot of people that I'm talking with. But you described your journey as more intellectual and I love that because, I think the diversity in the deconstruction world is vast.
Mm-hmm.
And but the way that you articulated it through the book was just beautiful.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah, it was
much.
really lovely. So for people who don't know, where does your story start?
Yes, sure. So I would say for me, my faith story starts at the very beginning because I was born to Christian parents
Okay.
who were themselves a bit later in life converts. They had done the whole born again thing as they were getting married and
Mm,
starting to have a family. I'm the oldest. And so they were kind of in the fresh fervor of new converts and wanted to do it all right and raise their kids to love the Lord. And so we were at church every single Sunday. We have a thing in the States called Awanas, which is like a children's ministry where you meet on a weeknight and you memorize verses and play Bible themed games. And it's like a
wow.
kids' fun zone, but religious based.
Yep.
Uh, so I did that for years. I was in youth group. I led Bible studies, all of it. So my faith was just a part of who I was in a very core, very central part of my identity. I thought of myself and I was taught to be first and foremost a Christian before I was even my own self. I was supposed to be dead to Christ and it's Christ who lives in you. And
Mm,
I understood that and I was on board. And yeah, you mentioned, kind of the pain and trauma. I feel very fortunate that my religious upbringing was fairly untraumatic. It was fairly healthy. I mean, I still, of course, have some shame complexes, and there was some unhealthy lessons that I
mm,
got from my faith. Purity culture affected us all. Um, but I didn't have any specific horrible experiences like I know so many people have. I
mm,
happen to be cisgender, I happen to be straight, so I didn't have to be closeted or deal with any pain of that kind.
mm.
Um, and so the faith of my youth was lovely. I really loved God and I really felt loved by God. God gave me an identity and purpose and value and really molded me in ways that I am still glad, grateful for. I'm glad to be the way I am. And I accredit a lot of that to my religious upbringing.
Mm,
Um, so it made it extra hard to leave because I wasn't planning on leaving. I wasn't intending to
yeah.
leave. And when it all eventually did fall apart and I could no longer believe in the concept of God, it
Mm,
was really painful. It was a grief. Someone had died. It
mm.
was really hard. So that's where the trauma came in, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
it's I feel like it's almost worse than someone dying because that's, very, you know, it's a stock standard response when someone dies is that you grieve. And
Mm.
it's, I guess a socially, when I talk about emotion, grief is one of those things that I describe as it's like socially acceptable emotion. Um,
Mhm.
and and yet this, God was more than a person, you know.
Right.
Well, it was for me, it was part of my identity. It was, completely interwoven and connected.
Mhm.
So I would imagine that that grief was, much more ritualistic.
Yeah. I
Um,
can-
how did it come about in terms of, I obviously know a few the things that you've written in the book, but what was that process like for you when you started to question things started to unravel?
Yeah, so it was a really slow boil for
Mm,
me. It was not a sudden shift. And at the time, again, it did not feel like it was leading toward where I have landed in this agnostic atheist space.
mm,
Um, so for the longest time, it just felt like I was growing and maturing in my faith and getting into the meat and not the milk, as the verse says. And so my faith evolved as I grew and had experiences with people and places around the world. I was very, very lucky to get to go to Australia during college
yeah.
and spent 5 months outside of Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute there. And I met a lot of wonderful people on campus that were Muslim.
Mm,
And, that was a little chip or a little loose thread in the sweater of, huh, these folks sound just like me. They
yeah.
believe as strongly as I do. Their faith guides their life to the extent mine does. They quote their Bible, their Quran, the way I quote the Bible. Um, so that would really threw me and kind of opened me up into a little bit more of a universal sort of space. Meeting my first openly gay friend really threw that under the microscope of,
Mm,
he seems lovely and fine. Why is his very nature wrong and sinful? I don't get that. That
yeah.
led me to question and read books and watch documentaries and change. So it was all very organic and just natural, just through life and having experiences and meeting people. And I am a reader, and I've always taken my faith very seriously, which meant I've read the Bible cover to cover, but I've also read tons of devotionals and books about the Bible and books about Jesus. And as I learned more, um, it actually opened up a lot of questions the more I dug into things. And I just ruminated on stuff. I really tried to live into my faith and be dwelling on the words of the Lord constantly. And so eventually those raised questions and some doubts sprung up. So it was a very slow process, probably really the last 15, 20 years. This has been coming. And again, I didn't at the time just thought my faith's just expanding and growing.
Mm,
But there was a more pivotal shift that pushed me into this foreign land that I'm now in of atheism, where um, it was during the twilight zone of the pandemic, kind of early pandemic days, where everything's closed. We're all stuck in our homes. You weren't seeing anybody or going anywhere. I had been laid off. I'm a physiotherapist by day,
mhm.
and folks were afraid to go and exercise in gyms with other people. So a lot of us got laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, and no one was hiring for a while. So I'm just home with the kids who were very little and not able to talk to me a lot still at that point. And so I was in my head. I had a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
And especially in America at the same time, we had the murder of George Floyd at the hands of one of our police officers. And that brought up a whole lot of racial tension that had been always there under the surface. It all bubbled up. And so
Mm,
this idea of racism and evil and suffering was very, front of mind.
yeah.
And it was ultimately those questions as I pondered the world that we have, the world that I can see with my eyes and know, despite my very privileged experience as a cisgender straight white woman,
Mm,
other people's worlds are very different and are very challenging and painful. And especially going back in time and thinking about,
yeah.
people born enslaved and just all kinds of ways that humans have suffered horrifically. on this planet to think, why would God make it this way if they were all
Mm,
powerful and could have done anything? Um, and ultimately, to me, it felt more true and more almost comforting to think maybe God didn't. Maybe there isn't a God. Maybe we're just here because we're here and it's just all science and
yeah.
byproduct of evolution. That actually felt better to me than to think someone did this way on
Mm,
purpose.
yeah. It's interesting because as you talk, I have in my head that, it was intellectual, but I mean, yes, there's intellect there, but what I hear is empathy, really.
Mm,
It was empathy towards, people of other faiths and other genders and sexuality, and empathy towards wanting racial justice. And,
hmm
and I know that you talk a bit in the book about climate change as well. And
hmm
so, whilst yes, intellectual, it's also empathetic, though.
Sure.
Your heart was what started that, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. It was fueled by my heart, but processed in
Yeah,
my brain because yeah, it
yeah.
wasn't necessarily my particular story, but yeah, the
Mm.
awareness of others. So, yeah, that's true.
Mm. And
Mm,
so, what was it like for you to start, uh, I guess, considering that this God that you had devoted your life to
hmm
was potentially not real?
It was scary. I think I wouldn't even let myself go there and
Yeah.
even ask that question in my head for a long time.
Mm,
I talk to other people now that I've met and on this path, and a lot of people in my life are still Christians, a lot of my friends, and
mm,
the area where I live is a very religious town. And so the assumption is anybody you're talking to is most likely, at least in name, a Christian. Um, and as my book comes up or I'm having some of these more conversations, a lot of people say, well, yeah, when I was a kid, I wondered if God was really real. I had never wondered that. I had
oh,
never asked, could God be a made up thing? I
mm,
think protectively, my brain threw up a barrier of like, don't go there because you need this to be real. You have dedicated your whole life to it, as you said. Uh,
yeah.
and so it felt very scary to even formulate the question. um, I just remember my heart pounding and, just feeling so anxious to even think it. And I knew I think part of my fear was that I was starting to lean after I had been growing and learning so much. I kind of knew what I thought the answer was going to be if I let myself ask. So I was afraid to ask the question because I was afraid of the answer that I was leaning toward because I
Yeah.
knew that would rock my whole world. My husband is a Christian. Our children have been raised going to church. Almost
Mm,
all of our friends are believers. So I
yeah.
just knew it would rip the rug out from under everything. So there was a lot of fear in that. But then, shockingly, when I did ask it and said out loud to my own ears only, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think something's out there, or at least nothing remotely close to the thing I've been taught about growing up, to where I wouldn't feel comfortable using the word God. It would have to be something so completely different,
Yeah.
new word needed. Um, when I admitted that to myself, I felt such a profound sense of peace
Mm,
because that cognitive dissonance just melted away. And I didn't have to try to figure out how this is possible and try to defend God for letting all these horrible things happen. So, on a personal level, it felt so right. And I felt very calm saying it out loud. But then the anxiety and fear was still the fallout. And what is this going to do to my life?
yeah,
hmm
absolutely. Because I guess, many of us were under the assumption being in churches that you don't ask questions because questions
hmm
signified doubt, or that, if you ask the wrong question, it could lead you down the wrong path, or, those sorts of
hmm
things. And
I
so,
guess they were right.
yeah,
Whoops.
I know we're probably proving their point. Um,
Dang it.
but what was that like in terms of, your family?
Yeah, I mean, none of them are thrilled.
Yeah.
My parents are also believers, and
Yeah.
they have read the book. My husband read, he read a version of the book. I don't know if he's read the final edited copy that's published. I think he was
Mm.
close to that version. Um, yeah, no, I think it freaked everybody out. Um, Thankfully, I have people in my life that are able to hold two things at once. You know, they're able to not agree with where I'm at and not be thrilled about it, but still love me and want me in their life. And so
Yeah.
nobody ended a relationship. This didn't sever any cords. I'm sure there are people that I had known in my younger years when
Mm.
I was in a more closed-minded space of faith that would write me off now, but we've long since lost touch. The church I've been going to for the last decade plus is a very progressive, open minded church. They're
Mhm.
open and affirming. We have female preachers and elders. We have scientists come do lectures or sermons on Sunday service. They've done sermon series on doubt and encouraged doubt and talked about how important it is.
Right.
And God can handle it. If God is there, they're big enough to handle our little questions, you know?
Mm.
So no one was too scandalized. Even my own pastor, I talk about him in the book a little bit.
Mm.
He helped me process a lot of this as it was happening. We met up in the pandemic a couple times for, you know, social distance walks, six
Yeah.
feet apart on the sidewalk. And he knew everything I was thinking and didn't, you know, say, you're gone. You can't come to church anymore. You know, he's very encouraging. He even has been helping promote the book and he got me some more writing gigs and has been like a supporter. So he's not
Okay.
only not threatened, but he's encouraging people to read. He bought the book for the whole elder team to read and said, like, this is a trend. You know, a lot of people are leaving religion and
Yeah.
leaving faith. So let's use her story to understand how this happens and better understand these folks. So I feel
Wow.
extremely, extremely lucky and fortunate in that sense that nobody has written me off over all this. But yeah, my parents aren't excited, and my husband, it's been painful for him. You know, he's hurt. It feels like a bit of a betrayal because we
Mm.
would have both never married someone who wasn't a Christian.
Yeah.
And now he finds himself married to someone who doesn't believe in God. So I can't really be a
Yeah.
Christian either. So
Yeah.
it's new territory for us. So we're
Yeah.
working through that still.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I mean, I'm sitting in my couples therapy brain just turned on for a second, and when, mixed faith relationships in general are hard, let alone when that mixed faith comes out of the blue almost, or
Mhm.
not from the beginning. And
Mhm.
so I would be expecting that to be a slow fade as well, in
Yes.
terms of that slow healing. But
Mhm.
when I talk about healing, I often say slow is fast because anything that
Mhm.
is done fast is not always done well.
I wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to circle back because I remember when I read this, I thought, oh, I could never, which is you still go to church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about that because I read that and I thought, I mean, and obviously different experiences, but
Mhm.
the thought of sitting in a church service, particularly the service, the church that I was a part of, it makes me feel physically nauseous. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, oh, the inner strength of this woman. Like, how? How are you doing that every week?
Well, it's not every week. We have young
Okay.
kids who get sick every other week. So it's
Yes.
definitely not that consistent right now and hadn't been for a while. Um yeah, well, as I just kind of described, my church is pretty special. So they're
Mm,
not a bunch of closed-minded, you know. They're a special group.
mm,
And so they aren't giving me dirty looks or, you know, whispering behind their hands when I walk in the door.
yeah.
Quite a few people at church have read my book. I haven't really gotten to discuss that with any of them, so I would be kind of curious what they think, but at the same time, I don't really care or want to know.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so it's to the credit of my church and how great they are, for one thing.
Mm,
Um, And the reason I'm going, if I was just my own person, unattached, without relationships, I would probably not be going. I
okay.
would actually be kind of curious to try some other spaces out. And we have a Buddhist temple in town. I'd be curious to go to, we have a Unitarian Universalist church. Would be exploring those more likely. But I am married and my husband is still a believer, and we had been raising our kids going to Sunday school there. And so I've already thrown a bomb in our marriage. I just felt like I didn't want to rock the boat too hard and change our entire weekly schedule as well. So
Yeah.
I'm going as a bit of an olive branch, for my husband. And because my church is so good, I'm not really worried about them messing up my kids. They're not teaching dogmas or beliefs that I'm going to feel like I'm going to have to erase down
Yeah.
the road. Even the whole theme of our kids community is I wonder. So
Mm,
they're not about preaching, this is the right stuff and we have all these answers. They're always approaching things from oh, what does that sound like to you? Or, what do you think about this? And I don't know, maybe that could, so they're very open ended, which I love,
mm,
because they've done a sermon on how much we have had to all deconstruct as we learn unavoidable truths. Science comes in the picture. You think about evolution. So they
mm,
don't want to have all of our kids have these stumbling blocks that could cause them to completely leave the faith, and
mm,
are trying to head those off by just being more honest and authentic from the get-go and more willing to admit what they don't know. So yeah, it's a pretty good place to be. There are certainly weeks though that it's hard to be there. I kind of tune out during all the singing. I was never a big singer, and that was not my favorite part of the service anyway. And I find the lyrics can be triggering for me.
mm.
Those are harder for me. So my little guy, he's 5. He doesn't like Sunday school, so he always sits with us. So he's a great distraction because then we're coloring and he's asking, bugging me and asking me questions.
Yeah,
So I
where's
just,
the snacks?
yes, exactly. The first thing he wants when we sit
Uh,
down. So I just let him distract me and kind of be my little buddy during that time.
yeah.
Um, and then, week to week, it varies what the message is. And there have been weeks where the main point of the sermon is still a life lesson that
Mm,
I can benefit from. For me, the reasoning behind maybe why to lean into gratitude or generosity or hospitality or whatever they're talking about isn't to please God up in the sky, but I still think those are good ways to be a human. So I just try to reconceptualize the sermon as I'm hearing it, or I kind of use it as a check. Okay, what do I think about that? Does that still sound wrong to me? Because I am agnostic. I'm trying to stay
yeah.
truly open minded. So I analyze and I help it sharpen my thoughts and beliefs, even if I'm criticizing everything they're saying. That also can feel like, okay, I guess I really do, disagree, and I really think what I think right now.
Yeah,
So
because I would imagine there would be times where it's actually really reinforcing of, the exploration that you've already done.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. A recent sermon was a harder one to sit through because it was harping on God as sovereign and all powerful,
Mm.
and just kept talking about how God can do anything. And I'm thinking, well, then God's a giant asshole because they're not
Yeah.
doing a whole lot to help a bunch of people, looking
Yeah.
at Ukraine and Gaza and just, all kids with cancer, just 100 examples you could easily come up with of where
Mm,
is God? And they're okay watching that happen. So
yeah.
that one was tough to sit through. Like, ugh. That's
Yeah.
why I walked away. Because if God is, as you're saying right now, that powerful, then I've got some problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it goes back to, I think I commented on one of your posts today about your chapter titled Free Will, where I
Mm.
basically went through every human emotion possible in that chapter. Because you do say in there, like, if there is a God and he is allowing this to happen, that's not a God that demands my worship. That's not somebody that
Mm.
I want to have anything to do with.
Mhm.
And I think that concept of where is God in suffering and in pain is often, I guess, that clincher for a lot of people.
Mhm. And I
Because
used to explain
yeah,
that away so tidily
I
with free
know.
will. Well,
Yeah.
God has to protect free will. Otherwise, we're all puppets. So they have to give us that power.
Mm,
Therefore, people make good and bad choices. The bad choices domino and hurt us all.
Yeah.
That was a very easy way to get God off the hook. And it worked in my mind for a long time.
Mm.
But as I started to question free will, both from a philosophical point of view, which is very interesting, and there's more and more talks, that's entering the zeitgeist a lot more now of questioning of free will. There's a book by, I don't know if you know Robert Sapolsky. He wrote that Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, or a book, something like that. He has a new one out
Oh,
all about free will and
right.
determinism. That sounds fascinating. I heard him on a podcast. Um, and so, yeah, just thinking about free will from an actuality,
Mm.
if this is really a phenomenon that exists or not, if we just think it does.
Yeah.
um, but even if it does exist, questioning the practicality of it. Okay, if we have the free will, it's being hoarded by, the rich and powerful, truly, and they're playing dominoes, playing chess with the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
They are making the world not a world I want to live in, with the climate change, pollution. I don't have the free will to stop that from happening. I don't have the free will to eat food that's grown out of good soil that hasn't been depleted by, mass farming practices. I
Mm.
don't have free will left and right. I don't have free will to buy clothes that were ethically made, because it's
Yeah.
really hard to even do that research or check into that. There's so many ways that my free will is limited, let alone, again, thinking of that person born enslaved. They didn't
Mm.
have the free will to eat when they wanted to eat and how much. They didn't have the free will to marry, to keep their babies. Um, so if free will is already that constrained and that controlled, then it kind
Mm.
of takes the excuse out of it. If that was the big get out of jail free pass for God,
Mm.
but in actuality, most of us aren't getting to use our free will, then
Mm.
it felt like, okay, that excuse isn't going to work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. What else you got for me, essentially?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. What was it
Mhm.
like for you trying to reconcile your emotional love for God with all of the new intellectual information that you're getting?
Yeah, that was the anxiety piece. That was
Yeah.
the fear, because I
Yeah.
had loved this God and felt known and felt loved. I remember I have journals after journals filled with prayers and
What is it
quiet
with
times.
Christians and journals? I tell you, everyone.
We were told this is what a good Christian
I
does. You got to
know,
pray in
and I'm
quiet
the
time.
same.
And I thought, gosh, was I just talking to the wall? But then I thought, you know what? If no one ever was listening, then my own head brought me a
Mhm.
lot of clarity and relief. Just writing it out must have been therapeutic all by itself. So it's
Yeah.
almost comforting to go back and imagine a world without God this whole time and say, okay, well, then I still got through all that tough stuff on my own. Maybe it was a placebo effect I needed, but if God was never there, well, I've still survived a lot of the things I've survived, and, gotten through life on my own 2 feet, I guess, and with the help of my community and friends and family and etc. Um, but yeah, it was a deep sense of loneliness, though, for sure, when I kind of let go of that idea. And I think I talked about in the book the very first night that I just laid down and started to pray on autopilot. Just
Yeah.
crushed me. I started weeping, thinking, oh, I don't think anyone's listening. And I have done this, for my whole life. I've been talking to the ceiling. And
Mm.
to think that it's no one's hearing my thoughts, that felt very lonely. Um, the first time, I'm a huge nature lover, and the first time I saw a really beautiful scene outside of nature, and I always would have been, praise God, thank you, God, your hands are so wonderful. You created this glorious world. Now to think, oh, I don't have anyone to thank. Oh gosh. But then at the same time thinking, okay, well, it's still beautiful. I'm still looking at something really pretty.
Yeah.
With or without God, I can just appreciate the beauty for what it is. So as things came up, I kind of had to process on the fly. And
Mm.
I am a naturally optimistic person, so I can find those silver linings pretty fast,
Mhm.
which helps. But yeah, it's a whole new world, like literally, because God
Yeah.
was a factor in every piece of my world.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
is there, because often when I talk to people who uh were all in, I guess, most of the people that I'm talking to were all in. They're not the lukewarm people who just went
Right.
every now and then. But there was almost like a needing to reintegrate into society as,
Mm.
as outside of the church. Was there any of that for you in terms of reintegration without this underpinning belief that you always had?
I think that has had to be solo for me,
Yeah.
because my community is still so religious
Mm,
across the board. I have had to just do a lot of that in my head
yeah.
as I go through my day to day. So, because yeah, I'm still going to church. Our
Yeah.
friends are still pretty much believers, and they like to talk about things, and they're not threatened by having me being real and saying what I really think. But it's definitely kind of a elephant in the room. Now the conversations don't flow quite the same. We
Mm,
just end up talking about other stuff, which there's plenty in American politics to be talking about all the time.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that reintegration I think has been the loneliest part, because that's why I wrote the book, because I felt so alone. I was the only person in my life who had made this decision and had done this, and I couldn't find a lot of other people like me. And I looked for some books, and I couldn't find a lot of books that had completely walked away. A lot of the progressive Christian voices questioned a lot of things,
Mm,
but still held on to an idea of the divine or of God. And here I was really thinking that even that was out of the picture. So
yeah.
that's why I wrote my book, was to find other people like you guys.
Yeah,
And to
because
make
it's
those
like
connections.
double sense of loneliness, right? Because you're
Mhm.
not just doing this work on your own, but you're now that there's no belief in God, there's that inner feeling of being alone. That's a
Mhm.
lot of loneliness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I and I have been asking most people about, I guess, where their sense of spirituality is now. Um, and you said that you're a huge nature lover, which having
Mhm.
just devoured your book, I would say is an understatement. Because the way my personal therapist is a forest therapist, and so
Oh.
I'm actually going, yeah, he would love your book because if he can bring nature into every conversation, he will.
Mhm.
And
As one
the
should.
yeah, and as I'm reading, I'm thinking the way that you talk about nature is spiritual. I
Mhm.
mean, in itself, the way that you describe it and the way that you almost interact with nature has a
Mhm.
spiritual element to it.
Mhm.
Um, is nature a big part of that for you?
Oh, certainly. And it's funny because the reason I feel such a connection to nature and have these moments of transcendence where I feel like I am at one with all these other living beings, animals and trees included, everything, is because of science. It's totally secular why I feel that way.
Mm,
I did not learn about evolution until I was an adult because that was
mm,
wrong and I wasn't supposed to. So I blocked my ears in school and I refused to learn about it. And I fled to the Christian history teacher at my high school and said, "Give me ammunition to debate my anthropology teacher."
yeah.
So I did not learn evolution for a long time. And
Yeah.
again, thankfully, I'm a reader and I'm curious. And so I had picked up some books on paleoanthropology and learning about specifically human evolution way, way back to like our common ancestor with the ape days
Mm,
was so fascinating to me.
mm,
And just to think about that tree of life, these branches that we all started off, the very first living single-celled organism is the
mm,
great, 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 great grandmother of everything on this planet. Everything started at one point in time, which is bananas and still very mysterious to think about.
mm,
Um, and, you know, plants were one branch, animals another, blah, blah, blah. So I feel literally connected to everything in the
mm,
universe and on the earth now, and knowing about the kind of science of our cells and electrons, like the quantum stuff, how our electrons are both in our cells in our body, and at the same time the probabilities, they're here but they're also everywhere. So an electron from a cell in my body could be on a different galaxy right now, or could be in you right now, or be part of the computer processor right now. We are blending our very cellular makeup with everything around us at all times, just
Yeah.
literally connected. And so to me, that's so beautiful and
Mm,
profound and totally secular. Doesn't need any. So spirituality is a little tricky word because I'm
mm,
fairly um naturalist. I don't know. I don't know. There's some definitely weird, inexplicable things with near death
yeah.
experiences and past life kind of stuff, but that would be really hard for me to land on that side. I lean towards it's lights out, we're done. The physical
Yeah.
world is the only world. Who knows? And it'd be great to find out that I'm wrong and that there's something else after this that's lovely for everyone, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a pretty hardcore secular worldview, and
Mm,
yet it feels very, yeah, spiritual, quote unquote,
yeah.
in that
Yeah.
sense. But spiritual implies another realm, a spiritual world on top of the physical world. And I don't
Mm,
know that I technically agree with that. So
mm.
semantics, but yeah, I
Yeah.
get
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, and I guess spiritual is the term that I would use, but I guess it is just I use the term spiritual in the sense of like an inner connection almost.
Hmm.
And
That sense
so
of like awe.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how do you look back on your time in the church as a Christian?
How do I look back?
Yeah.
I don't, I see a lot of memes of people talking about like, give me my tithe money back or all those
Mm.
hours I spent. And I
Yeah.
get that. Um, I guess I don't have a ton of regret. I feel a lot of empathy toward my old self. I believed that because it was in the air I was breathing. I was raised without it really having, again, free will being a choice. I was a Christian because my parents were Christian and it was my life.
Mm.
Um, so I don't beat myself up or feel like I was dumb or duped or anything like that. It's like, well, of course I was a Christian. If
Yeah.
I had been born in another country, I most likely would have been a Muslim.
Mm.
So much of who we are is circumstantial based on our context.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't feel any sense of like shame or disappointment with myself for not having figured it out sooner or anything like that. It's a journey, and I my husband, one thing that we'll talk about, for him, it's very compelling that humans, even way back to pre Homo sapien, like Neanderthal days, have had a sense of spirituality, have had the understanding or assumption that there is something else out there, that there are these divine things, whether that was animism and in nature at the time, but we have had that compulsion to believe in something greater from the very beginning. So to him, that's
Mm.
evidence that there is something. If every single human has always thought, going back in time, which is not true, every single, and you can find ancient Greeks who are atheist, and it's not
Yeah.
always everyone everywhere, but um yeah, to him it feels almost arrogant for me to be like, yeah, no, every single human society's been wrong.
Mm.
I'm right, and there is nothing out there. Um, so there's reasons why we all have these spiritual ideas and religious thoughts, and I don't want to discredit or throw it all under the bus. I
Mm.
think it's been part of the human experience and the human journey to ask really hard questions like, why are we here? And what is the point of all of this? And maybe we came up with our own answers to that all along. Maybe there is some ultimate truth out there that we're still circling around and we'll find out one day.
Mm.
Um, which is why I do try to cling to that agnostic label, because I don't want to become so closed off in now, the flip side of my beliefs and say, nope, absolutely not. There cannot be a God. Like,
Mm.
well, maybe there is something. I don't know.
Who knows?
I
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't actually solved the mysteries of the universe,
Yeah.
believe it
Well, then why are we even having this conversation? Um,
or
no, I mean there is arrogance everywhere in terms of different beliefs, and
Mhm,
there is arrogance in every belief system and non-belief system.
mhm,
And I think as soon as we sit on any end of any spectrum, that's when it becomes an issue. That's when it becomes dangerous.
mhm.
Um,
One of the things I would say I cling to now, or worship would be the wrong word, but value strongly, is curiosity.
Yeah.
Humble curiosity has become a catchphrase of mine.
Mm.
Um, Remaining humble and not thinking I've got it all figured out. I'm 38 years old. I have not arrived. And staying curious and continuing to learn and grow and ask questions and not be afraid of, you know, pulling on some of these threads.
Yeah. And I think curiosity is one of the things that I have found most freeing about deconstructing because it is anything but black and white, which is often what
Mhm.
you are, taught is very sort of this or that, right, wrong, very
Mhm.
binary thinking. And so just to be even able to step outside of that and, you know,
Mhm.
see the many shades of grey and colours
Mhm.
in between black and white is equally daunting as it is freeing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's intimidating. The black and
Yeah,
white is so comforting because
yeah.
then you can feel certain in your rightness.
Mm,
Well, if it's this or that, I'm this, that's the right answer. So I'm good. If
mm,
it's all murky and unknown, well, I don't know. Am I right? Am I wrong? It leaves a lot of room to doubt yourself or, not be certain.
yeah,
And that can be a space of beautiful creativity, but it can also be very scary because you could be totally barking up the wrong tree
yeah,
if it's not a clear cut yes or no, right or wrong answer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there moments where you go, oh shit, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I've just like jumped down this rabbit hole and I am wrong?
I do laugh thinking because 15-year ago me would have never thought I would be an
Yeah,
agnostic atheist ever in a million
yeah.
years. So 15 years from now, me, I like to joke I could be a fundamentalist back
Who
in
knows?
a cult. I don't know. I doubt it. But
Uh,
so who knows? I don't know. I doubt, I don't know. No one can predict the future. I doubt I would turn back into a classical Christianity. I would lean, I'm assuming, if anything, I would go into a mystical approach to
mm,
any kind of religious beliefs. Um, One thing that has given me great comfort in thinking, what if I am wrong and God's out there watching and seeing my
mm,
book and not happy?
yeah.
Um, it has been learning about near death experiences. I
Mm,
did some reading on those, and they are universally positive.
mm,
And no matter if the person having one was an atheist, was any kind of religion there is, if they were trying to end their own life, they
mm,
all had, 90+% of the time, very similar experiences. There's kind of like 12 common experiences people have. And so not everybody has all 12, but somebody will have these four, somebody else these six pieces of the near death experience package. And they're overwhelmingly good. People feel a sense of that oneness of just deep, ultimate love or peace. The white light is, a part of that, an out of body experience. And so to think, okay, these atheists are having those experiences, these mobsters are having that experience, people living what I would have judged as really evil, harmful lives had that same experience of being loved and at one and all is right. So
yeah.
that gives me peace thinking if there is something, because some of those stories are pretty bananas. There is one I read about that the woman she was a kayaker, river kayaker, and had gone over some rapids, and her kayak got stuck on, flipped, and she could not. The water was pushing her so
Oh,
strongly she could not flip it back over. She was underwater for over half an hour.
oh
She
my
was bloated
gosh.
and blue and somehow
Oh,
was resuscitated. So her brain, like she was dead. There's no
yeah,
way, no oxygen that unless she adapted gills really fast or something, I don't know. So to think it, because you could say, well, near death, maybe our brains go through a last, firing of all the neurons, and that's why we have these. But there are people that are brain dead and have these
yeah.
experiences, um, and they're so mysterious, right? Like the out of body stuff is kind of wild to hear about. People see things on other wards of the hospital or other units. How are
Mm,
they seeing? Their eyeballs are in a different room, taped shut in surgery, and they're seeing quote unquote things or hearing things. So it's just very mysterious, and consciousness is mysterious. I'm still reading and learning about that. And there's a lot we don't know, but it
mm,
seems like if there is something, everybody seems to have this great, universally lovely, good experience when
Yeah.
they are near death. So that gives me hope to think, okay, if I've barked up the wrong tree, it doesn't seem to be limited to this Christian God.
Yeah.
We all seem to be good to go.
Nobody's seen any flames.
No, and the people that say their experience was bad, it was just because it was scary. Like the
Yeah.
life review freaked them out, or the out of
Mm,
body floating sensation was scary, but it's
mm,
not because they saw flames
yeah.
and welcome to hell signs.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Um, and so you've mentioned a couple of times, I guess, we in Australia look at the US and I go, that is a shit show over there. Like in
Mhm.
terms of the enmeshment of Christian
Mhm.
nationalism in literally everywhere.
Yep.
And so, how do you look at that now versus how you would have 15 years ago when you were one of those Christians?
Yeah, I was never one of those Christians for long. I was gonna say, as soon
Ah,
as when I was young and I was in high school,
mm,
I would have called myself a Republican knowing nothing about what that meant.
yeah.
And the first time I could vote when I turned 18, I did vote for George Bush, again, having done zero research and just having
Mm,
gleaned from the atmosphere that Christians are Republicans, so you vote for Bush or
yeah.
whoever the Republican nominee is. Um, as soon as I started paying any attention, I've been a Democrat ever since, and on the
Yeah.
more liberal and progressive side of things. And there's a lot of Christians like that. So I think some of those conversations get very black and white, where it's like all Christians are these conservative, gay haters and
Yeah.
anti-science. And that's not true. There are plenty of progressive, kind, loving, inclusive Christians. They exist, and I was one of them for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, but seeing that political climate and how enmeshed it is in Christianity
Mm,
is just so disheartening, because I do still think Christianity can have a lot to offer. Again, it made my life good and it
yeah.
gave me a lot of values that I appreciate.
Mm,
Um, but culturally, it is so warped and it's gotten so commandeered, by the political nature of it. And that's been intentional. It's really depressing to read about how concerted efforts have made it the way it is now.
mm,
It didn't just happen by chance. It was always a piece of white supremacy and a piece of keeping the power and keeping others subjugated and under. So it's hard not to get really bitter and jaded about all that. Um, but I had always been, when I was in that boat, still able to separate religion from God. To me,
mm,
of course, religion was corrupt and messed up. Humans ran institutions of church. So
mm,
yeah, they're messed up, but God isn't part of that. And they have it wrong, kind of thing. So I can still see that the institutions of faith and the religious right and some of that stuff, I wouldn't even call that a religion anymore. It has become this political
yeah.
entity, really. Um, and so, yeah, it's its own whole monster. But to me,
Mm,
it really doesn't count as like a spiritual practice or belief system. It's something different and quite
mm.
ugly, unfortunately, and quite
Yeah.
powerful, which is
Yeah.
scary.
It
Yeah.
has become, like you said, its own entity.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I will often say to people, I'm not anti-God, I'm not pro-God, I'm
Mm-hmm.
anti-fundamentalist and I'm anti-harm and I don't have a freaking clue what I believe, but that's okay. Um, but, like you said a couple of times already, which is that there are, you know, the teachings of Jesus, for instance, are not inherently bad in any
Mm-hmm.
way. And so, are there parts of your former belief that you still hold dear without, I guess, the concept of the divine over the top of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the values that I have, which are predominantly empathetic and social justice oriented, I got from the prophets and from
Yeah.
Jesus and the Beatitudes. And so, yeah, those remain true for me and are still the way I want to be human and show up in this world. Again, it's just the motivation's different. It's not doing that to please God. It's doing that because I think that's a way to be a good human and both make the most of my life and this random experience of consciousness I get to have, while recognizing that my success is tied up in everyone else's success, and that I owe it to the human family to try to relieve suffering where I can, not to get brownie points for salvation, but just because we are part of a human family. And again, learning about evolution and realizing how wimpy and vulnerable our species is, that we only have survived this long because
Yeah.
of each other and because we
Yeah.
work together or have, um, motivates me to, yeah, to do whatever small bit I can. That gets so overwhelming because
Mm.
we're so globally aware of all these problems that I have zero influence over.
Yeah.
Um, but trying to focus on what I can influence and what my sphere does touch, and
Mm.
just do what good I can there. But yeah, I definitely, it's interesting about it, Jesus, because I've since finishing my book read a really fascinating book on the historical anthropological figure of Jesus that kind of
Wow.
really threw, because I was still clinging to a lot of, that was a harder thing for me to process, for like, if God isn't real, then what is Jesus all about?
Mm.
It was Reza Aslan's book Zealot, and he makes a pretty strong case that Jesus was truly a Jewish Messiah. One of many messiahs seemed to spring up every other year back in that day.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a huge claim for a person to make. There was countless messiahs that the Roman Empire continually executed. And it was a political role. He was concerned about Jewish liberation. They were an occupied people. Um, and that a lot of the more universal Christ, Savior of all, is really Paul's brainchild. And
Mm.
that Paul kind of formulated a lot of that. Paul, or I guess it wasn't all Paul, because John, the book of
Yeah.
John, I am the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was before God. But those aren't Jesus saying that. That's somebody
No.
else. So it's like they took this person who was clearly captivating and got a
Mm.
lot of people's attention and seemed to have a very loving, inclusive, progressive point of view with treatment of foreigners and women, all that stuff. Kind of took it and ran with it and turned it into something else. And I'm okay with that now. As a Christian, that would have freaked me out. But
Yeah.
now I'm like, okay, if it's all Paul, well, Paul had some cool ideas. And if Paul is the L. Ron Hubbard of Christianity and just came
Mm.
up with this on his own, neat. Like there's
Yeah.
Paul's been misinterpreted and a lot of bad stuff came out of that too. But um yeah, the I can just see it, looking at religion as a human construct,
Mm.
to me opens it up to make it much easier for me to be able to just take the good out of it without having to put the importance of my soul and eternity on it all. So I can just say, like, okay, I can see how maybe this was all just his little philosophical brainchild. And but I
Mm.
like that, and I like this, just like I like Taoism, and I've been reading the Tao Te Ching, and I've been reading Rumi, and there's a lot of good in a lot of different faiths, and I can more easily see that kind of like from an objective outsider and just pull out the parts that call to me and that I like.
Mm. What was it like for you when you finally finished writing your book?
It was so clarifying. I mean, it was such a good experience. I've been saying it's kind of funny to think in the past, the process of writing the book, I was in a flow state a lot of the time. It poured out of me. And I would have accredited the Holy Spirit to that before and said the Spirit
Mm.
was speaking through me, because the book just, I mean, every time the kids went down for a nap, the minute after bedtime, I was on the, and it just, I didn't have writer's block at all. It just literally poured out.
Yeah.
So it was a unique experience of feeling like from using my body as a conduit, it was my story, and I think it just needed to come out. So yeah, the process of writing it was very clarifying and therapeutic and helpful for me to write, because I started writing it almost immediately after first saying, like, I don't think God's real, pretty
Mm.
early, because I had a blog at the time, and I had tried to blog about this because I had blogged about spirituality and politics and all kinds of stuff. And every time I started the blog, there was just too much to say. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to package this. And so that's what made me think, gosh, I think there's enough. If I go into the backstory and explain how I got here, I think there's enough for a whole book.
Mm.
Um, so it happened pretty instantaneously. So the whole second half of the book, when I have walked away from faith and I'm now asking, who am I? And, this massive identity crisis and processing the grief, writing all that was very helpful and clarifying for me to figure out who I who I am and where do
Mm.
I find meaning now and what does morality look like without God watching from the eaves and all of that. So it was very helpful. And um yeah, I felt excited. I know. So the publishing world nowadays is totally popularity driven. You need to have 100,000 plus Instagram followers or Twitter followers,
Yeah.
and I have nowhere near close to that. So I had very low hopes that it would get out there. I was planning to self-publish it.
Mm.
But through Instagram, I met my publisher, who's a more small indie publishing house, and that's been great. And so it's been fun to have the book still not, I'm not on any big bestseller list. It's not, flying off the shelves, but people are finding it. And I've had people from around the world, yourself and other countries reaching out. And so that's been really neat because that that sense of loneliness was a big motivation of why I wrote the book. I thought
Mm.
I felt alone. I know I'm not. I know there's got to be others like me who have gone down the same similar route. And if I can give them any sense of comfort or camaraderie, then that would be amazing. So to have been able to do that for even a few people has been just a gift. It's been really cool.
I think I wonder if its popularity with people is that I've never read another book like it, to be honest. The
Mm,
the intersection of it being spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and personal, of
mm,
those four intersections that, in some books you only ever get one of those things, to
mm,
have all four of them in one book, I think there is almost something in there for everybody. And I
mm,
think that's really unique. Okay, in present day, what
mm,
brings you joy and peace?
mm. Being outside
Mm-hmm.
brings me a lot of joy and peace. We live in a very pretty area of America where I'm up in the upper north, the Pacific Northwest,
Mm-hmm.
the upper left corner of the country is some of
Okay.
our hashtag. And so it's very pretty. There's mountains nearby, a lot of evergreen forests and rivers and lakes, and it's beautiful. So I try to get outside as much as I can. I am a mom of young kids and I have a job, but we try to go hiking and we do a lot of camping in the summer and try to get out. So being outside, I get to feel that sense of connection and, looking around at everything and think, you are my distant relative. And so
Yeah.
that's really fun. Um, I still get a lot of joy and awe from reading and learning. And so I've been picking up a lot more books, and stretching my mind that way is exciting for me and gives me some encouragement that I haven't learned everything. There's still a lot of stuff out there that I can investigate and be challenged and stretched by.
Yeah.
And then my kids, they're so cute. They're 5 and 7, and they're just at
No.
such fun ages with their imaginations and their personalities are really shining. And so trying
Mm.
to lean into the present moment with them, knowing how fleeting it is, and just having more,
Mm.
trying to get more moments of connection and not just like wishing away the day to get to bedtime because it is exhausting at the same time. But to be
Yeah.
there and to have the dance party in the kitchen and to let them do
Uh,
my makeup and, to enjoy that as opposed to being like, ugh.
yeah. Yeah. When is it bedtime?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm,
I have been finishing all of these episodes by asking what would you say to someone who is fresh in their deconstruction? That thread has just started to unravel.
mm. I would wish them courage.
Mm.
Um, and also at the same time, tell them that they are not obligated to follow that thread. If
Mm.
they're happy living their life and don't want to rock the boat, no one's making them, A placebo effect is still an effect. If their faith does something good in their life, keep going. You don't, not having any kind of religious belief has been so freeing for me, but to also see that, yeah, there is no impulse to do, my life is literally just my life. I mean, I shouldn't be breaking the law, but I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so can you. So if you like thinking about this and you need to find a sense of truth, by all means explore and take comfort knowing others have gone down the same path and their life didn't totally implode.
Mm.
And that there's joy and peace on the other side. And for me, even more than I ever had in the faith. But also I like to, just give people an out and say, you don't owe anybody anything. You don't have to answer these mysteries of the universe yourself. We are just tiny little humans here for a
Yeah.
few decades. You get to live your life the way you choose. And if being religious is part of that, I wouldn't take that away from anybody and say that they're obligated to deconstruct. But yeah, you do you.
I love that. Yeah. I think I love that sense of like autonomy, almost self-autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
You just do what feels best for you. Don't
Mm-hmm.
hurt anyone. Just do what is best for
Right.
you. Right?
Yeah. Do no harm
Yeah.
and go forth.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes. Thank you. This was wonderful.
It's been so great. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are on your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.